Hi and welcome back. In our last video we went ahead and covered the basics of creating CSS and applying it to a web page. In this video we're going to go ahead and take those basic skills that you learned in the last video and begin to apply them to format the design that we have in our project website. Now, if you downloaded the exercise files and are using the framework for this video, you're already going to have a CSS folder here created along with a styles.css file. If you don't have that created, what you're going to want to do is right-click right up here and do New Folder and create a folder called CSS. I already have one, so I'm going to call it CSS1, but you're going to call yours CSS. Then you're going to want to right-click on that folder and do New File and create a file called Styles. Oops, I need to type that out right. Styles.css. So very easy to create that. I'm going to go ahead and delete that because I've already got mine right up here. Now, I've gone ahead and opened up my main document right here, and I'm looking at it. And when we look at the HTML code, you're going to see right here, we have a link to the styles.css sheet. If you're not using the exercise files, you're going to want to go ahead and place this line in the head section of your document. And again, reviewing what we learned in the last lesson, the link tag establishes a connection between an HTML file and another file. In this case, this link is creating a link between our style sheet and our HTML page. And that's what the link reference or the hyperlink reference attribute here says. href, and then it's giving the path to that CSS sheet. The relationship between this document, this HTML page, and this document right here is that it's a style sheet. The type of style sheet it is, it's a text-based CSS style sheet, and the media that this style should be applied to is the screen. And you're going to also see below that I have the exact same line. The only difference is it's pointing to this print style sheet that we'll deal with in a later video. And the media type here is for print. And it's going to be this style sheet, your first one, that's going to be used when the page is displayed on a screen. If the visitor decides to print your page, it's going to use this CSS style sheet in order to print the material. And again, we'll deal with print style sheets a little bit later. So you need to create a link between this style sheet or the style sheet in your CSS folder and your HTML page. Now, you should see up here at the top a little button that will allow you to look at the CSS style sheet that you've attached. And again, that's the print style sheet, and these are a couple of JavaScripts that are also attached, which you could see right here. And again, when we start dealing with some of the content areas and that fading banner, we're going to talk more about these JavaScripts. But right now, you can go very easily back and forth between your HTML code and the link style sheet right here. And you're going to notice there's a little asterisk in the upper right hand corner of this style sheet indicating that there's unsaved changes in this particular document. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and import a style sheet or a set of styles to get myself started with this project. And there are lots of starting style sheets out there that you can download. The one I use fits in with this HTML page. If you are looking for alternatives to mine, you may look at a couple of other frameworks. One's called Blueprint, the Blueprint CSS framework. That one you may want to look at. Or there's another one called the 960 System CSS framework. And both of those have default style sheets for you to begin with. You can type all of these out as well. Either way you decide to do that. But I'm going to go ahead and go into my framework. And inside of my framework folder right here, you're going to see there's a CSS folder. And in here, there's a file called basic.css. And that's just, again, sort of my starter CSS. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. I'm going to go to Edit, select All, and then I'm going to go to Edit and Copy. So I'm going to copy everything out of that basic CSS file. And then I'm going to come back into my main document in my style sheet, not in my source code, but in my style sheet. I'm going to right-click and paste that in. And this is going to give you a starting set of styles to work with. And we're going to later on delete some of the things we don't need here, but this is a really good starting point so that you don't have to retype all of these rules. Now, the first thing in any style sheet is going to be something called a reset. And what a reset does is it establishes a new baseline for all of the element styling in your HTML page. The problem with CSS is that every browser is going to have its own defaults for CSS styles. Internet Explorer is going to be different from Firefox, which is going to be different from Chrome and Safari. So in order to sort of level out all those differences, you use what's called a reset. I have the one here that I work with, but there are lots of different resets that are available out there. And the one that this is based on is the Eric Meyer reset. And again, you can go to Google and type in Eric Meyer reset, and you can see his original one, along with, or you can search for CSS resets, and you can find out more information about this. But basically, all that a reset does is resets all the styles to a certain set baseline, so you don't have to worry about the differences so much between the different browsers. You can kind of compare this to a painting. If you've ever seen a painter paint something, they don't begin painting directly on the canvas. What they do is they put down a base coat or a primer coat on the canvas so that the canvas is all that uniform color. And then they start actually creating their image on that prepared canvas. This reset is preparing your canvas for the styles that will follow. If I scroll down just a little bit more, and you can see all the styles that are in here, I'm going to come to another section called Global. Now, whenever you see a slash and an asterisk and this text in gray here, that means that it's a comment. And comments allow you to structure your CSS file so that styles are grouped into logical categories, so you don't have trouble finding things. And it's good to use the same structure in every single CSS file that you work in so that you can find things. So I should say that so you can find styles. One of the worst things that happens to a lot of designers is they start off and they just start writing their CSS rules from the top down, and their styles are all jumbled up together, and they can never really tell where something is or what they're doing. And what that leads is to you creating repetitive styles and also to creating styles that conflict with one another. So always figure out some sort of internal structure for your styles. Again, I always start off with my reset, or every style sheet should start off with a reset. There's a lot of sh's in there. Every style sheet should start off with a reset. And then after that, I have gone ahead and created a couple global styles for my HTML and my body tag. I have all my heading styles right here. Then I style my text elements here. You can see some different paragraphs, some links, block quotes, strong, the M tag. I have an empty section for images, and this is where I would place any CSS that's meant to style an image. I've got some styling here for my lists, as well as tables. And there's some miscellaneous styles right here. We're not actually going to use any of these. And one of the last things we're going to do is we're going to delete styles that we don't need. And then, this is actually the most important part. I have a section here called Containers. And the container names here, or the div names here, match the ID styles in that basic HTML page that I worked with a little bit earlier. If we go ahead and open up that basic HTML that goes with the basic CSS, you can see here in the containers, wrapper, top, banner, sub banner, so on and so forth, and these correspond to the containers that are listed over here. So we'll have no trouble identifying where our containers are and styling those IDs appropriately. Now, we didn't actually leave these containers stock. We actually renamed some of them, so we are going to have to come in and rename some of these. If I scroll down just a little bit further, I've got some boxes here. We'll see what I use those for a little bit later. We've got some extra layout space, some space to put some navigation elements in for our menus. We've got some default styling for forms here. And these are going to be very useful when we set up our contact form. And then under miscellaneous, I have a whole bunch of class styles that I use in various places. And again, we're not going to use most of these here under miscellaneous. So I'm going to go ahead later on and probably delete most of these styles. And then down at the bottom, I have some miscellaneous styles that I use for message boxes and error alerts and things like that. And again, we won't be using these styles in this project, but they're there if you wanted to use them later on. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll up here again, and we're in our containers. And let's go ahead now and start to modify the styling on this web page. I'm going to bring up Chrome so we can go ahead and look at the completed style or the completed page here. And again, you can see right here I've got the logo, and then I've got social media icons followed by top nav right here. So those are the first three divs. The whole thing is contained in the wrapper, so I'm going to come back to that, but we don't have a top div here. What we do have is we have a logo, so I'm going to go ahead and change that to logo. And then I'm going to go ahead and create another ID style called social-media-icons. And then I'm going to do an opening bracket, tab, and a closing curly bracket. And again, that's going to correspond to the logo div right here, that's right outside the wrapper, and then the social media icons. After that, I have the top nav, which is these links right here. Let me go ahead and bring up the browser window. There's our top navigation. And then we have our banner. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into my CSS styles, and there's banner. We also have sub-banner, but we're not going to use that, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that style. And there's top nav. If you want, you can drag this up so that they're in the proper order. Logo, social media, top nav, and then banner. I also don't have a content wrapper, a left navigation, or a left side. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all those. What we do have is a right side, a content area, and a footer. And again, if I bring this up, you're going to see there's our content area, there's our right side area, and here's our footer area right here. And I'm actually on the About page. Let me go to the home page here, and you'll see what we've been looking at. So I have the content area, the right side area, and then the footer area. So with those few changes, I've successfully set up all of the containers that I'm going to need for my design right here. And we're just going to start at the top and work our way down, styling each one of these elements. And again, there are two different aspects to CSS styling. There is the formatting aspect to it, where you change the way the fonts look and things like that. And then there's the positioning aspect to CSS. Usually what's going to happen is your formatting characteristics, changing the font, the size, the color, all that good stuff, is going to be done with tag and class styles. Whereas the positioning is going to be done using the ID styles that we have here on the containers. So let's begin. I'm going to go ahead and bring this up again. The first thing you're going to notice is that the design has been constrained into a certain area here. And the area that it's been constrained into is as wide as my image right here. So the design is actually going to take up 900 pixels because that's the width of this design here, or that's the width of this image. Ignore this margin space for right now. We're going to return to that. So the overall design should be 900 pixels wide. You're also going to notice that the design is centered on the page. So I need a way to center all the content. And that's what we're going to use the wrapper for. The wrapper contains all the design elements. So if I make that a particular width and center it, all the interior items to that wrapper, the top, or I'm sorry, not the top, but the logo, social media, top nav, all that stuff will also be centered and constrained into that area. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this, and I'm going to come in here to wrapper, and I'm just going to go into code view here, and I'm going to add two property value statements to this CSS rule. The first is going to be width, and I'm going to make it 900 pixels. And the second is going to be margin. I want the margin to be 0 top and bottom and auto left and right. Now this bears a little bit more explanation. There are two properties that are commonly used to space things out. One is margin and the other is padding. They both work exactly the same. It's just applied a little bit differently. You're going to have the name, either margin or padding here, and then you're going to have between 1 and 4 values in the value area here. Now, if you just place one value, let's say 20 pixels, on our margin statement, that's going to provide 20 pixels all the way around the wrapper. 20 pixels of margin all the way around the wrapper. Top, bottom, left, and right. If you want a different top and bottom margin from your left and right margin, you'll put in two values here. For example, if I did 20 pixels and then 30 pixels, this would give me 20 pixels top and bottom and 30 pixels left and right. So one value applies that margin value all the way around the container. If you put two values in, it's going to be top and bottom for the first number and left and right for the second number. If you want to specify the individual top, bottom, left, and right margins, you'll use 4 values. Now when you're doing this, an easy way to remember it is that it's going to go clockwise from the top of your container. We have a square container, and if I was to go ahead and put 4 values in here, I'm going to do 25 pixels and 10 pixels here. What this says is 20 pixels top, 30 pixels right, 25 pixels on the bottom, and 10 pixels on the left. And the easy way to remember that is it's going clockwise around the container. Top, right, bottom, left. Top at 12 o'clock, right at 3 o'clock, bottom at 6 o'clock, and left at 9 o'clock. So you can put anywhere from 1, 2, or 4 values in here. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to go ahead and put 2 values in, because I want there to be 0 space top and bottom, and I want the design to be centered left and right on the page. Now, you could go about figuring out exactly how much space for every window should be on the left and right. But then anytime the window resizes or the content resizes, your design is going to be off center. So that really doesn't work. What you want to do is tell the browser to put the same amount of space on the left and the right, regardless of how big the window is. And that way it floats the overall design into the center. And you do that by typing auto for the left and the right value. So the margin is going to be 0 top and bottom and auto or centered left and right. And the whole thing is going to be 900 pixels. I'm going to save that and go into design view, and you can see here now the design has been centered in the page and I have 0 space on the top. And you can see that's been cut off right there. So we've set up our wrapper. Now, before we go any further, I actually need to be able to tell where the wrapper space is, or where the content section is, and where the page background is. And right now, this is all just has a white background on it, so I can't really tell visually where things stop and start. I mean, I can, but it'd be a little bit easier if things were shaded in. And what we want is we want to use an image on this for this background. We're going to come to that later. Right now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a color for the background of my image. So I'm going to come into here to code, and I'm going to scroll up, and if I apply a background color to the body tag, since all the content is inside of the body tag, the background color will affect the entire page. So I'm going to go ahead and do background dash color. And when I type a colon, it's going to bring up this little menu for me. I want to select color by using the down arrow or clicking on it, and then hit enter. And that's going to bring up this color prism. I want to come into here so I can exactly specify what I want, and I'm going to choose just this light color of beige right there. So I'll click OK, and that applies the background color of that background color to the entire page. Let's look at this in design view, and sure enough, everything has that beige color. Now, in our design, we don't actually want the wrapper area to have a color inside of it. We want that to be white. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into my code here for my style sheet. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to find the wrapper div. And I'm going to click in here, and I'm going to say background color. And this time I'm going to go ahead and select white. And you'll begin really quickly to pick up what these codes mean. If you want all black, or if you want something to be black, it's going to be 0, 0, 0. If you want something to be white, it's going to be FFF. And our CSS, our Introduction to CSS series, goes more into detail about those color values. And then I'm going to end that statement with a semicolon. So I've said apply a white background color to the wrapper. And sure enough, when I come in here, you can see I've got a white background color on the wrapper. And you're also going to notice this image comes right up against the border. Now, there's an issue here right now. And that's because we want to center that wrapper div, but we also want some margin space outside of that wrapper div. You can see that right here. But the problem is, when I look at my style sheet, I can't give this both a value of auto. Whoops, let me scroll down here. I can't give the margin a value of auto and also say it should have 20 pixels on the left and the right. So here's what you're going to go ahead and do. I'm going to come back into my source code here, and there's the wrapper div. And what I want to do is I want to encase my wrapper div in another div. And you'll see this is kind of hard to explain at first, but you'll see where I'm going in just a moment. So I'm going to say div ID, and I'm going to call this outer. So that div is on the outside of the wrapper. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll down here, and I got to close that wrapper div. So I'm going to go ahead and do a closing div down there. Always remember, when you open your div, you have to close your div. Or whenever you open a tag, you have to close a tag. And now I'm going to go into design view, and you don't see any difference, and that's because we haven't formatted that outer div with any styling yet. And what I want to go ahead and do is I'm going to come back into styles, and I'm going to be in code view here. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this style, this wrapper style, by highlighting it and going to edit, copy. And then I'm going to go ahead and paste that in there, and I'm going to change the name from wrapper to outer. Now, right now, the outer is going to center on the page with a 0 top margin. It's also going to be 900 pixels. So again, you're not going to see any difference here at all. But now what I'm going to go ahead and do is on this, I'm going to go ahead and place some spacing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the width of this container a little bit wider. I'm going to say that this is 900 and let's say 60 pixels. There we go. We'll save that and let's take a look and see what that does to our design. Sure enough, now I have some white buffer space on both the left and the right here. So that finishes up formatting the container divs, the outer and the wrapper div. The next thing we want to do is just go div by div, formatting the logo, the social media icons, the top nav, setting up our banner here, and doing our content area. So I'm going to come back into the code for my CSS here and scroll down until I find my containers. And the first one we're going to do here is the logo. Now, the logo, we want some space around. Right now it's pushed right up there against the top, and that's not going to work for us. We don't want to push it more over to the left or the right, though. We just want to put some space on the top and the bottom of this. So again, I'm going to go ahead and use that margin property. So I'm going to say margin, and top and bottom, I want there to be 30 pixels of space. But left and right, I want to leave that alone, so I'm just going to go ahead and type in 0. If you put a value in, you should always do the px. If the value, though, is 0, you can leave that off, or you can type it in. Either way works just fine. And now I'm going to go ahead and go into my design view, and there we go. We can see we've moved that around. Now I'm going to go ahead and come into the code view again and scroll down, and I'm going to come to my social media icons right here. And I need these social media icons to move over here to the right. That's where I need those to go. So I'm going to come back in here to the code, and if you want something to float to the right, the statement that you're going to use, the CSS statement you're going to use, is going to be float with the value right. Again, just scrolling down here. And so I'm going to go ahead and say float right. If we wanted to go to all the way to the left, we could do float left. And I'm going to do design here. And you can see those media icons have floated down or floated over to the right. Right now they're a little bit obscured though, and that's the reason for that is I'm going to go ahead, and this is again where Dreamweaver's design view comes in very, very handy. If I go ahead and click on the edge of this image, it's going to show me the div that contains that image, the logo div. And you can see I've got 30 pixels of margin on the bottom and 30 pixels of margin on the top. You'll see that little yellow tooltip appear there. And this whole thing is the div, and you see it's going all the way over here to the right. And that's the reason why these icons have been pushed down. So I need to do a couple of other things in order to format this correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and come back in here to the code for my style sheet and scroll down until I find my containers. And there's the container for the logo, and the command that I'm going to put in here is float to the left. And again, what float to the right does is it says float this content over to the right. What float right does is it says move that over to the right. What float left does is it says move this over to the left and allow everything else to sort of flow around it. When I go ahead and go into my design view, you can see actually, first off, if I select the edge of that, it no longer extends the entire width of the design. It's now only taking up the amount of space that it needs for its content. And it's now, we've said formally, float this over to the left. We've also said float this container over to the right. So we've got that going on over there. Now, we see a problem right here because our our top nav has also floated up in here. So we need to go ahead and correct that in just a moment. Actually, let's go ahead and do that right now so we can get that out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down here until I find my containers. Here's top nav. The command that you can use to say don't float things up, or don't float this up in to the other elements, is clear. And I want to say clear both. And that means I want it to clear both the left and the right floats that may come before it. When I do clear both and save, you can see that jumps right down there. My social media icons are still over here, however. Now, the next thing that I need to do is I need to go ahead and position these horizontally as opposed to vertically. Now, if we look at the code for our social media icons, we can see the reason why they're appearing stacked on top of each other. And that's because the social media icons are in an unordered list, in a UL list. And each icon is contained in its own list item. Now, what that's going to allow you to do is precisely position all of these different elements. Now, I'm going to go ahead here and go back into my style sheet and scroll down. And I'm going to find my container. And after float right here, I need to go ahead and create another style. And the style that I'm going to go ahead and create underneath that is, again, for the social media icons. So that's the div name right there. But I don't want this to affect everything. What I want to affect are the list items, the LI items. Normally, LI items are stacked on top of one another, and that makes perfect sense for a list of items. But what we want them to do is we want them to line up left to right. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to say in the social media icons div, any ULs that have list items, So I'm saying look in the container social media icons. Find an unordered list and apply this style to any LIs that are in that unordered list. And I'm going to go ahead and just hit tab a couple times here to space that out so I can read it a little bit better. And what I want to go ahead and do is give this the property display inline. So instead of being stacked on top of each other, displayed stacked on top of each other, they're going to be displayed in line with one another. And let's go ahead and save that, and let's look at our design. And I need to refresh here. There we go. Go into live view and just hit refresh if this doesn't show up. And you can see your social media icons are now lined up one against another. So that display inline property will cause list items to be displayed inline as opposed to stacked on top of one another. Now, right now, these icons are right up against the edge here. I also want to push them down. Now, I could apply margin to each one of these individually, but I'm not going to do that because I want to take, and actually let's go into design view for the, let's go into look at the code here. You can see that this UL encompasses or encloses all these list items. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'm going to come back down into my containers, and I'm going to go ahead and say inside of the social media icons div, if there's a UL, I want to apply some margin to the top. And again, one value just gives margin top, bottom, left, and right. Two values would give it top and bottom for the first, left and right for the second. Four values gives you top, right, bottom, left. Now, if you want to specify just one margin, in this case the top, you do margin dash top, or margin dash bottom, margin dash left, whatever it is you're looking for. And then a colon, and I'm going to say 30 pixels. So I'm saying take that unordered list and bump it down 30 pixels from the top. And now when I go into design view, you'll see those icons have been pushed down. And it still doesn't look like they're down as far as they are in the other one. So I'm going to go ahead and change, or in our sample, so I'm going to change that to 40 pixels. And now when I go into design, that looks a little bit better. And when we look at our sample design, you can see the way that's appearing. Now, the next thing that we want to go ahead and do is we want to go ahead and format this top navigation. And that's what we're going to go ahead and start on in the next video. So I'll see you in that video.